Do you always smile like that? Or is this a strategy to deceive customers? Park Ji-hoon's cold voice echoed in the luxurious lobby of Hotel Solis. His presence immediately froze the employees around him. Kim Soo-yeon, a hotel receptionist known for her bright smile, faced him without wavering. There was still a smile on her lips, but there was a hint of discomfort in her eyes. Reception staff must provide a warm atmosphere to guests. A smile can change a customer's day. Ji-hoon crossed his arms and looked her up and down, as if analyzing her. Isn't it possible to deceive people with a smile? His voice was sharp as a knife. It was a moment that revealed the strong character he had built up while expanding the group's business over a long period of time in New York. However, Ji-hoon's visit was not simply a return to work. His real purpose was to find clues about his mother's disappearance. Soo-yeon kept smiling and slightly lowered her head. I'm sorry, but all I can offer is my sincerity. And please excuse me, because I have a guest waiting. Ji-hoon watched as she returned to her guests and still maintained her perfect demeanor. It was annoying, but I found her firmness strangely interesting. But he soon shook off that thought. These feelings were unnecessary to him now. As the day passed, Ji-hoon's presence became more and more evident to the hotel staff. He checked every detail and was especially harsh on Soo-yeon. Kim Soo-yeon, please come to my office. As it was getting close to work time, Ji-hoon called Soo-yeon to his office. Soo-yeon opened the office door without shaking and went inside. When Kim Soo-yeon opened the door to Park Ji-hoon's office, a cold tension filled the room. Ji-hoon was sitting behind the desk, looking through documents, but as soon as she came in, his eyes were fixed on her. Kim Soo-yeon, Ji-hoon began as he put down the documents on the desk. I heard you were popular with guests at this hotel, but I think your methods are overly emotional. Soo-yeon calmly accepted his words. I believe that building trust with customers is the key to this job. Emotions are part of that trust. Ji-hoon tilted his head and looked at her. But emotions can cloud objective judgment. Emotions are a weakness in business. Soo-yeon was silent for a moment and then opened her mouth. Director Park Ji-hoon, if you feel that my emotions are interfering with my work, can you give me a specific example? His expression changed subtly. He seemed taken aback by the unexpected rebuttal, but quickly regained his composure. Yesterday, why were the changes requested by our VIP guests not subject to additional verification? Do you think that one smile will solve everything? Soo-yeon took a deep breath and answered calmly. The customer had already requested expedited processing, and we decided that additional confirmation could actually cause confusion. As a result, the customer was satisfied and there were no problems. Ji-hoon's eyes narrowed. Her answer was logical, but somehow it sounded like she was defending herself. He spoke in a slightly stronger tone. This hotel is run by a system, not personal judgment. Please keep that in mind. Soo-yeon nodded. All right, from now on, we will more closely follow the system that the managing director deems important. Her attitude was firm but respectful, and Ji-hoon did not continue talking. The moment Soo-yeon was about to leave the room, he asked an unexpected question. Kim Soo-yeon, do you always maintain such a confident attitude? If it's real. Soo-yeon paused for a moment, looked back, and smiled softly. It's true, manager. Not only for the guests, but also for myself. After she left, Ji-hoon turned his attention to the documents on his desk, but his mind was full of complicated thoughts. Her determination and confidence showed she was more than just an employee. That night, Ji-hoon went through the hotel's old documents again to find traces of his mother. But there were no clues about her anywhere. Instead, an old photo caught his eye. In the photo, my mother was smiling brightly in the hotel lobby. Ji-hoon stayed still for a while holding the photo. Soo-yeon's smile appeared in his mind once again. Her words were disturbing his mind. The next morning, Park Ji-hoon was checking the VIP invitation list in the hotel lobby. Kim Soo-yeon, please come for a moment, he said in a cold voice. Soo-yeon answered his call and approached him. What's going on, manager? He said, handing her the clipboard. You may have heard about the Gala show next week. I will place you on the team that oversees this event. Soo-yeon looked slightly embarrassed. I have no experience in organizing events, but I will do my best. Ji-hoon snorted at her answer and said, If you're that confident, you'll get used to it quickly. And teamwork is important. I hope it goes without a hitch. Soo-yeon nodded at his words, but deep inside, she doubted his true intentions. To her, it seemed like Jae-hoon was simply testing her. As preparations for the event began in earnest, Soo-yeon spent a long time with the team. Thanks to her bright personality and quick response skills, many problems were easily solved, but she could still feel Jae-hoon's sharp gaze. One evening, while she was busy solving problems related to the gala's decorations, Jae-hoon showed up unannounced. "Why didn't you finish your work by this time?" When he asked, Soo-yeon answered calmly. An unexpected problem arose, but it was almost resolved. Jae-hoon looked around and said, "If it's difficult to deal with small problems like this, managing an entire VIP event will be difficult." Soo-yeon spoke, unfazed by his criticism. "It has its challenges, but I am working with everyone here to create the perfect event. I hope the managing director also believes in the team's efforts." Jae-hoon was speechless for a moment after hearing her words. Soo-yeon's attitude aroused unexpected emotions in him. Her confidence and determination reminded him of something he had lost. In the process of preparing for the event, the two continued to clash, but within that conflict, a small understanding of each other began to sprout. In the last week of preparation for the gala show, the hotel was full of tension. Every detail had to be perfect, including decoration, sound, and guest list. Kim Soo-yeon was exhausted from finishing work late into the night with her team members, but her smile still remained faint. That night, while arranging fresh flowers in the lobby, she turned her head when she heard footsteps coming from behind. It was Park Ji-hoon. He quietly came to her side and lifted a fresh flower. "Do these things really matter to guests?" he asked. Soo-yeon sighed briefly and answered, "Small details stick in guest memories. The moment a guest feels that they have had a special experience here, the hotel becomes not just a place, but a meaningful space." Jae-hoon looked at the flowers and was lost in thought for a moment. "It's a special experience? I've never experienced anything like it. Hotels have always been just business to me." Soo-yeon nodded as if she wasn't surprised by his words. "That might be possible, but it's different for guests. A hotel is a place where someone's memories are made." Jae-hoon put down the fresh flowers without answering her words. But something changed in his expression. The next day, a problem occurred while preparing for the event. Due to delivery delays, important ornaments did not arrive. The team struggled to find an alternative, but the situation was not easily resolved. Jae-hoon came directly to the scene. "Kim Soo-yeon, how will you handle this situation?" His voice was cold, but there was also a hint of anticipation. Soo-yeon answered calmly while giving instructions to her team members. "I will take responsibility for solving any delivery delay issues. For now, we will utilize other resources that can replace it." She quickly connected with nearby stores to secure alternative decorations and worked with her team to make up for any shortcomings. The problem was resolved within a few hours, and event preparations were back to normal. Jae-hoon quietly watched Soo-yeon solve the problem. Her leadership and calm demeanor exceeded his expectations. That evening, he approached Soo-yeon and spoke quietly. "I didn't know you would be so responsible. I was wrong today." Soo-yeon looked at him and smiled. "Thank you for saying that, managing director. But this is a result of solving it together with the team, not alone." For the first time, Jae-hoon made an expression similar to a smile. It was small but heartfelt. The night before the gala show, the inside of the hotel was quiet but tense. Even after most of the employees had left work, Kim Soo-yeon stayed behind and did final inspections. As she remained in the lobby and checked the location of the decorations again, she happened to spot Park Ji-hoon standing to one side. He was looking at an old photo in the corner of the lobby. The frame contained images of the hotel when it opened decades ago. In the photo, a woman who appears to be Jae-hoon's mother was smiling brightly. "Manager, you haven't gone yet?" Soo-yeon asked quietly. Jae-hoon said, continuing to stare at the photo without raising his head. "Have you seen this picture? Do you know who that woman is?" Soo-yeon tilted her head as she looked at the photo closely. "He looks like an early employee of the hotel, but I don't know the details. Are you someone special?" Jae-hoon was silent for a while and finally opened his mouth. "This is my mother. He worked at this hotel when I was young, but one day he suddenly disappeared. I haven't heard anything since I left here. Suyin felt the emotion in his voice and spoke cautiously. He must have left behind many memories here. Are you coming back because you want to find out more about your mother? Jihun nodded and looked down at the photo. It's one of the reasons I came back to this hotel, but I don't know if I can find it. I looked through all the hotel records, but there were no clues. Suyun was lost in thought for a moment while listening to him. Was there anything that caught your eye among the old items or records? Sometimes small things can give big clues. Jihun shook his head at her words. There was nothing like that. He took out a folded piece of paper from his pocket and showed it to her. This is an old note I found a while ago. The handwriting is similar to my mother's. Suyun said while reading the memo. The garden of the Annex, written here, seems to refer to a specific area of the hotel. Maybe we can find something here? Jihun fell in a deep thought after hearing her words. It's the Annex's garden. The next day, even as preparations for the Gala show were in full swing, Jihun walked toward the Annex garden. Suyun read a certain determination in his expression and followed him. The garden was well maintained, but it seemed like traces of the past remained intact. Jihun found an old bench in a corner of the garden and stopped when he saw the writing on it. Garden of Memories, he muttered quietly. Suyun came to his side and said, there might be some important clues here. Shall we look for it together? For the first time, Jihun did not reject her offer. There was a faint hope in his eyes. It's a garden of memories. Park Ji-hoon's voice was almost a whisper. His fingertips were moving along the old letters carved on the bench. Kim Soo-yeon stood next to him and looked around carefully. Manager, this garden is one of the oldest parts of the hotel. It may have been used as a space for employees to rest in the past. I think there might be something left here about my mother. Jihun nodded silently. His eyes went down the bench, and he saw a small box among the dust and leaves that had accumulated over the years. What is this? He knelt down, took out the box, and dusted it off. The box was old but still sturdy and had a small lock on it. Soo-yeon said as she got closer, maybe it's a secret box or something. Did you find the key? Jihun shook his head and examined the box with his hands. We don't have the key, but we need to find out what's inside. They tried to figure out how to open the box, but eventually got a tool from the hotel management and opened the lock. Inside the box were some old photos and a handwritten letter. Jihun carefully took out the letter and began to read. The handwriting on the letter was clearly written by his mother. Jihun, I never thought the day would come to write this letter to you. If you found this box, I wouldn't be here anymore. I just feel sorry for you. But the time I spent at this hotel was a precious memory for me. I hope you understand my secret. I love you, son. Soo-yeon noticed that his hands were shaking slightly. Jihun stopped before he finished reading the letter. Director, Soo-yeon spoke carefully. I think my mother left behind a story here. This might be a clue. Jihun raised his head and looked at her. There was confusion and pain in his eyes. I don't know what all this means. I don't understand why she left or why she left her mark in this way. Soo-yeon thought for a moment and then spoke quietly. Sometimes the process of finding the answer is more important. Mother clearly wanted the managing director to discover something here. Let's find it together. You don't have to handle it alone. Jihun was silent for a moment, considering her words. Then he took a deep breath and said, Thank you. Maybe you're right. They began looking through the photos in the box one by one. The photo showed the mother smiling with other hotel employees, and in one of the photos, a sign for the location called Annex Records Room was visible. The Annex Records Room. This might be where the next clue is, Jihun muttered. Soo-yeon smiled and nodded. Then shall we go? The answer may be nearby. Park Ji-hoon and Kim Soo-yeon walked into the annex as night fell. The records room was an almost forgotten part of the hotel, and there was dust in front of the door as if it hadn't been open for a long time. I think this is the right place. Jihun took out the key card from his pocket and opened the door. When the door opened, a room filled with old documents and books was revealed. There were traces of old times left there, along with a slight musty smell. Jihun slowly went inside, and Soo-yeon followed behind him. There are only really old materials here. I don't know where to start looking, Soo-yeon said. Jihun quietly looked through the pile of documents and muttered, I feel like my mother in the photo left something here. I have to find it even if it takes time. They each started searching for data on different sides. Jaehoon found an envelope among old files covered in dust. The name, personal record, Han Ji-min, was written on the envelope. It was his mother's name. This is my mother's record. Jaehoon opened the envelope and took out the document inside. The documents included records from when the mother worked at the hotel, as well as notes related to specific projects. The note had the phrase VIP Project 1997 written on it, and underneath it were numerous names and dates. Soo-yeon walked up next to Jaehoon and looked at the document together. VIP Project? It seems like something special happened. Did your mother manage this project? Jaehoon nodded and read more of the document. Looking here, it looks like my mother made some important decisions while taking on this project. And it appears that this project has had a significant impact on hotel operations. But there are no details. At that moment, Soo-yeon turned over the back page of the document and said, "Here's another note. Decisions are made in the garden." What does this mean? Jaehoon read the phrase and once again thought of the garden of memories in the photo. The garden was not just a place to rest. My mother had made an important decision there. This is not just a note. Mom might have been hiding something in the garden, Jaehoon said with confidence. Soo-yeon nodded and said at his determination, "Then I guess I should go back to the garden. There will still be more traces left by my mother," Jaehoon said, holding the envelope and document tightly. "But this time I won't find it alone. I'll find it with you. Thank you for your help so far." Soo-yeon smiled and answered, "This is not just the managing director's problem. The message your mother left behind may be meaningful to all of us." They walked back towards the garden. The quiet night air of the garden greeted them once again, and a faint but strong hope was blooming in Jaehoon's heart. Park Ji-hoon and Kim Soo-yeon, who returned with the documents they found in the Annex record room, moved back to the Garden of Memories. As the night deepened, the hotel became quiet, but the two people's hearts were turbulent with complex emotions. Upon arriving at the garden, Jaehoon walked to the center of the garden and slowly looked around the space. He tried to find small clues again, imagining what decision his mother had made here. "I guess we should start here." Jaehoon turned his attention to the old fountain in the center of the garden. The fountain no longer worked and was covered in moss and dust. Soo-yeon stood next to him and said, "Sir, if your mother is hiding something, the area around the fountain might be the most likely place. This is a place that people don't come to often." Jaehoon nodded and looked at the edge of the fountain. Faint carved letters were visible between the cracks in the old stones. "There's something written here." He brushed off the dust with his finger and read the text. "The truth lies deep inside." Soo-yeon muttered as she read along. "If it's so deep, is it possible that your mother placed something under this fountain?" Jaehoon took action right away. He knelt on the edge of the fountain and moved the surrounding stones one by one. Within a few minutes, I noticed one stone moving slightly. "This one," he shouted. When the stone was lifted, a small metal box was hidden beneath it. The box was rusty but still closed. Jaehoon lifted the box and opened it with trembling hands. Inside the box were old notes and several photos. The note was short, but one word caught the two people's attention. "If you want to find the truth, learn to trust." Jaehoon paused as he read the note. Trust? What on earth did my mother mean by leaving these words? Soo-yeon spoke quietly next to him. "I think my mother wanted to leave an important lesson to the managing director. Isn't this a message that is not simply about finding memories of your mother, but about making you reflect on yourself?" Jaehoon pondered Soo-yeon's words and looked at the photos in the box. In the photo, my mother and several hotel staff were smiling together. On the back of one photo was written, "Everything begins with people." His eyes gradually changed. He seemed to realize that it was time to think deeply about his life and relationships, rather than simply chasing the past. Mother didn't just leave behind the past. "You wanted to teach me something more important," Jaehoon said in a low voice. Soo-yeon smiled and said next to him, "Sir, I will continue your journey to find the truth. You don't have to handle it alone." Jaehoon looked at her for a moment and then nodded. The wall in a corner of his heart was slowly crumbling. Jaehoon Park walked slowly through the garden, holding the notes and photos he found in the metal box. The message her mother left behind seemed to go beyond simply finding clues from the past and to help her realize something about trust and relationships. Kim Soo-yeon quietly watched Ji-hoon's silence next to him. "Director, do you think this message is more than just a clue?" she asked cautiously. Ji-hoon paused for a moment, looked at her, and nodded. "My mother always told me about the importance of trust, but when I was young, I didn't understand its meaning. I think I understand a little bit now." Soo-yeon smiled lightly at his words. "Trust is not something that is gained all at once. I think my mother wanted the managing director to learn the process." Ji-hoon pondered her words and looked at the photo again. The mother's expression in the photo was bright and warm, and her relationships with the employees she was with seemed genuine and deep. "I guess I forgot about that until now. How important are relationships between people?" Ji-hoon said quietly. Soo-yeon nodded and walked next to him. "I think the managing director is already learning that. I feel that the attitude towards my teammates and me is gradually changing." Ji-hoon seemed taken aback for a moment by her honest words, but then he put on a serious expression. "Am I really changing? I still don't know who I am or where to go." Soo-yeon listened to his words, thought for a moment, and then spoke quietly. "I think change begins not with knowing yourself perfectly, but with accepting yourself. You have already taken the first step." Her words sunk deep into his heart. Until now, he had lived his life his own way, not trusting people, but now he was starting to feel different. That night, Ji-hoon stood in front of the hotel's luxury suite window and looked out at the city lights. In his hands were photos and notes left by his mother. "Faith," he said to himself, and read the note again. "Now I think I know a little bit about what my mother wanted." Meanwhile, Soo-yeon thought of Ji-hoon's words and expression as she returned to her room. He was not simply a cold businessman, but a man with deep wounds and questions. She truly hoped that he would discover himself through this journey. The next day, Ji-hoon showed a slightly different appearance at the meeting with his team members. For the first time, he listened to his employees' opinions and expressed his sincere gratitude for their efforts. The team members were perplexed, but little by little they began to open their minds to his changed attitude. After the meeting, Soo-yeon approached Ji-hoon and spoke quietly. "Managing Director, you look great today. If my mother saw it, she would be proud." Ji-hoon looked at her and smiled faintly. "There is still a long way to go, but I think we're making progress. Thanks to you." His smile was awkward but genuine. It was the beginning of a new trust that sprouted between the two people. A few days later, the gala show was successfully concluded and the entire hotel was filled with cheers. Employees congratulated each other and thanked each other for their hard work. Kim Soo-yeon smiled as she saw the customers and team members being satisfied, but her eyes naturally turned to Park Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon was quietly watching the employees in one corner of the lobby. Through this event, he felt that the distance between him and his employees was gradually narrowing. But even at that moment, there was anxiety in a corner of his mind. Soo-yeon came to his side and said, "Managing Director, the gala was really successful. Everyone is saying it's thanks to the managing director." Ji-hoon turned his head and smiled briefly. "It's probably more thanks to you and your teammates than it is to me." She tilted her head slightly after hearing his words. But without the managing director, it would have been difficult to finish this event like this. Such a humble attitude will also help build trust. Ji-hoon was silent for a moment as he considered her words, but his expression still showed some suppressed emotions. That evening, Ji-hoon was sitting alone in the garden, rereading the note his mother left. "Learn to trust." This simple sentence kept him stuck. However, his contemplation was soon interrupted when his father, Chairman Park Hyun-soo, visited the hotel. "Ji-hoon," Chairman Park said, his voice unwavering. "It's nice to spend time here, but what you must remember is that this hotel is a business. You must not be swayed by emotions." Ji-hoon responded to his father's words with a stern expression. "Do you think emotions have nothing to do with business?" Chairman Park nodded and said, "Okay, that's why we were successful. Your mother left here too, because she was swayed by her emotions. You must not repeat that mistake." His words disturbed Ji-hoon's mind. It sounded intentional that my father, who had never mentioned anything about my mother's disappearance, suddenly brought up this story. That night, Ji-hoon called Soo-yeon over to talk to her. She felt something unusual about his expression. "Manager, what's going on?" she asked. Ji-hoon hesitated for a moment, but eventually opened his mouth. "My father said the reason my mother left was because of emotions, but I don't know if that's true. I want to understand why my mother had no choice but to leave," Soo-yeon said, deeply sympathizing with his words. "Managing director, if emotions are the problem, I think resolving them is an important process between people. Because my mother also left behind her feelings. Let's find the answer together." Ji-hoon smiled faintly as he listened to her words, but there was still some tremor in his eyes. In the process of following his mother's footsteps, he realized that he had been suppressing his emotions, but the conflict with his father reminded him of those suppressed emotions. Ji-hoon strengthens his resolve to search for the truth again with Soo-yeon, and this time, he decides to move forward for his own future, not just the past. The next morning, Park Ji-hoon woke up early in the morning and headed to the Annex records room. The notes and photos his mother left behind were never far from his mind, and he knew he couldn't delay any longer. Kim Soo-yeon volunteered to accompany him so that he would not have to deal with it alone. "Manager, I'm sure we'll find something today." Soo-yeon encouraged him and spoke quietly. Ji-hoon nodded and opened the door. It was still dark inside the records room, and the smell of dust and old things greeted them. He began to follow the bookshelves, looking for traces of his mother. While they were searching for a while, Soo-yeon found a note in a small drawer. The cover of the notebook was old, but Han Ji-min's name was clearly written on the first page. "Manager, look at this," she called Ji-hoon in an excited voice. Ji-hoon hurriedly approached her and took the note. The notebook was filled with records written by his mother while working at the hotel. Among them was a page titled VIP Project. Ji-hoon opened the page and began to read. The VIP project was not just a hotel expansion, but an experiment centered on human relationships and trust. "The reason I took on this job is because they trusted me, and I am learning what is important through this process. But after all this, I might not be able to stay here any longer." His eyes began to waver. "My mother had a deeper story beyond simply her role as a hotel employee. I think my mother realized something through this project," Ji-hoon said quietly. "And in the process, he must have felt that he had no choice but to leave." Soo-yeon asked cautiously from next to him. "I think the reason my mother left wasn't just because of her emotions. Is there a bigger secret behind this project?" Ji-hoon thought for a moment and then said, "Maybe so, but one thing is certain. I think my mother wanted to leave behind the most important lesson, trust in people, through this work." He read further through the note and found another note on the last page. "Ji-hoon, if you found this note, you have already proven to yourself that you are a strong enough person. The reason I left here is because you have grown to the point where you no longer need to rely on me. But you are never alone. If you believe and open your heart, you will always find your people by your side." Ji-hoon closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His mother didn't just leave for her own sake. She decided to help him grow up on his own. Soo-yeon quietly placed her hand next to him and said, "Sir, as your mother said, trust is not something you find alone. We will all be by your side, Mr. Managing Director." Ji-hoon nodded, feeling her touch. Little by little, the heavy burden that had been sitting deep in his heart began to disappear. "Thank you, Soo-yeon. Now I think I understand a little bit what my mother means." For the first time, his voice contained true peace and hope. A few days later, Park Ji-hoon stood in the garden again, pondering his mother's message. I wasn't alone this time. Kim Soo-yeon and key hotel employees were present. Everyone gathered to realize the meaning of this garden and share the stories contained within it. "Everyone, the reason I came back here was not simply to manage the hotel." Ji-hoon spoke in a calm voice. The employees raised their heads and listened to his story. "This garden is a trace left by my mother. It was here that she realized the importance of trust and relationships and left her mark to leave them behind. I didn't understand this message for a long time, but now I think I understand a little bit." His words caused a small murmur among the employees. No one expected that the managing director, who had always seemed cold and stern, would speak such an honest story. Soo-yeon Kim took a step forward and spoke quietly. "The biggest message my mother left to my managing director was trust. And I believe that trust is not something we can create alone, but something we can all create together. Jehun looked at her and nodded. His eyes contained confidence and determination. That night, he gathered all the hotel staff in the lobby. Unlike usual, he opened his mouth once again in an atmosphere filled with warmth rather than tension. I have always thought of this hotel as just a business, but now I realize that this is not just a business space, but a place of memories that you and I are creating together. The true value of this hotel lies in the relationships between people. I trust all of you and hope that we will continue to create new history together. The employees cheered and applauded. There was new hope in their eyes. From that day on, Jehun established himself as a true leader of the hotel, not just a managing director. He valued relationships with his employees and listened to their voices. And remembering his mother's teachings, he gradually changed the way the hotel was run. Suyin quietly stayed by his side. She was still the bright face of the hotel, welcoming guests, but now there was deeper confidence and trust behind that smile. One evening, Jehun walked with her in the garden and said, "Suyin, none of this would have been possible without you. Thanks to you, I was able to reflect on myself." Suyin smiled and answered, "It was possible because the managing director wanted to change himself. I just helped." They sat together on a bench in the garden and looked at a small framed picture of their mother. For the first time that day, Jehun felt peace rising from deep within his heart. If your mother were here, would she have smiled at what she has become? Jehun asked. Suyin quietly smiled and answered from next to him, "Of course, Mr. Manager." Obviously, what we've learned through Jehun's journey is that sometimes the answers we seek are within us, and that the power of forgiveness, trust, and relationships can transform lives. What was the most impactful moment in this story for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story has touched your heart, please like and share it so that more people can see this message. Please help and continue to touch my heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on inspiring stories. The next story might bring you something special.